The cold hits you before you even open your eyes. It is not the cold of a bedroom with a broken heater. It is a cold that has no end. A cold that has been building for 4 months, that has killed the last of the berries, frozen the rivers solid, buried the roots you were counting on, and driven every large animal miles south to somewhere warmer than here. You are roughly 30,000 years ago, somewhere in what will one day be called Europe. You have no coat made in a factory. No stored calories in a pantry. No forecast telling you when the worst of it will pass. And yet your body, this same body you carry today, is going to make it through. How? For most of human history, winter was not an inconvenience. It was a test of everything. Anthropologist Brian Fagan, in his landmark book The Long Summer, describes Paleolithic winters in northern Europe as periods of relentless, slow attrition, a war of resources that lasted 5 to 6 months and claimed the weak, the unlucky, and the unprepared. The average temperature during glacial peaks dropped 10 to 15 degrees Celsius below what northern Europe experiences today. Not a cold snap. A siege. And yet your ancestors not only survived it. They did it for hundreds of thousands of years, on every continent with a winter, without a single piece of modern technology. So let's reconstruct exactly how they did it. The first thing your ancestors understood about winter was that you cannot fight it. You prepare for it. Long before the first frost, a band of hunter-gatherers, typically between 20 and 50 people, would begin a months-long process of reading the land. They tracked animal migration patterns, memorized which valleys stayed sheltered from the worst winds, and systematically tested which plant materials burned longest and hottest. This was not improvised survival. This was accumulated knowledge, passed down across generations with the same precision a modern physician memorizes a treatment protocol. Archaeologist Wil Roebroeks, who has extensively studied Neanderthal and early modern human fire use at sites across Europe, confirmed that controlled fire use dates back at least 300,000 years. That means your ancestors had hundreds of thousands of winters to refine their technique. They knew which wood burned clean and which filled a shelter with toxic smoke. They knew how to build a fire that radiated heat without consuming all the oxygen in an enclosed space. They knew how to bank coals overnight so the fire did not need to be restarted from scratch every morning, because in deep cold, running out of fire was not a setback. It was a death sentence. But fire alone could not save you. The second pillar of winter survival was clothing. Not animal hides thrown roughly over a shoulder, but engineered garments designed to trap heat in precise layers. At Sungir, an archaeological site in Russia dated to roughly 34,000 years ago, researchers unearthed the burial of a man covered in more than 3,000 tiny ivory beads, beads that had been sewn onto his clothing in a pattern so deliberate it took modern researchers years to reconstruct. The clothing itself had long since decomposed, but the bead placement revealed it was fitted, tailored sleeves, a hood, layered panels at the chest. This was not the work of someone improvising warmth. Needle-making from bone fragments appears in the archaeological record at roughly the same time and place, suggesting your ancestors' survival depended on the ability to sew one insulated layer precisely over another, the same layering principle a modern alpine climber applies when ascending in a blizzard. The third pillar was the kill. Animals like woolly mammoths, reindeer, cave bears, and giant elk were not simply food. They were raw material for an entire season of survival. Their hides became walls and roofing. Their rendered fat was stored to burn as lamp fuel, to waterproof clothing, and to supplement caloric intake during the weeks when hunting conditions made leaving camp impossible. Their bones became tent poles, needles, and tool handles. Their sinew became thread. Their stomachs, dried and hardened, became watertight containers. Anthropologist Pat Shipman, in her research on early human-animal relationships and cooperative hunting strategies, argues that the ability to process a single large animal into dozens of survival resources across a single kill event was one of the key cognitive leaps that separated bands that thrived from those that disappeared in hard winters. It was not just about hunting skill. It was about systems thinking. About looking at a carcass in October and seeing not food for a week but insulation, waterproofing, light, thread, and structural material for the next 5 months. Can you picture the scene? It is a late autumn afternoon, perhaps 25,000 years ago, somewhere in the Dordogne Valley of what is now southern France. The light is already failing. Your band of roughly 30 people is working fast. 2 men are stretching a reindeer hide across a wooden frame, pulling the skin tight to dry before tonight's temperature falls. A woman near the fire threads a bone needle through a seam on a child's laird wrap, tightening the stitching before it can fail in the deep cold of January. 3 others are rendering fat in a hollowed stone bowl, watching the slow yellow melt that will fuel their lamps through the long dark weeks ahead. An elder is teaching a teenager how to read the sky, pointing to a specific formation of cloud that, in the elder's experience of 40 winters, reliably precedes a hard frost within a day. Everyone is occupied. No one is waiting. Because in winter, idle means cold. Cold means dead. This is the picture the archaeological record keeps revealing. Not chaos and desperation, but organized, divided labor built on deep shared knowledge. The famous Abri Pateau rock shelter in the Dordogne shows repeated winter occupation over thousands of years, evidence that bands not only found shelter but returned to it reliably, which means they planned routes across seasons and taught those routes to the next generation as a survival inheritance. Now here is the part that surprises most people. Anthropologist Polly Wiessner, in her research comparing daytime and nighttime conversation patterns among the Juchonsi San of the Kalahari, one of the few remaining populations whose lifestyle offers a window into deep ancestral patterns, found that firelit evenings were not consumed by silence or sleep. Roughly 81% of all nighttime conversation in these communities was devoted to storytelling, about people, about the past, about explanations of the world and its forces. The same long, cold nights that pressed your ancestors into shelters pressed them into each other. Shared fires and shared stories were not a luxury. They were the mechanism through which the knowledge needed to survive the next winter was transferred from those who had lived many winters to those who had lived few. This makes perfect evolutionary sense. If your survival depends on a group of 30 to 50 people operating in precise coordination, then the season that forces you all into close quarters around a single fire is the season that rebuilds the trust and shared understanding the group needs to function. Winter was not just endured. It was used. The darkness was the classroom. Here is the counterintuitive truth. Winter did not only threaten your ancestors. It built them. The cognitive demands of cold weather survival, planning months ahead, processing resources into multiple future use categories, maintaining social bonds under physical stress, reading environments with precision, teaching complex skills to children before those children needed to use them alone, are among the most demanding tasks a human brain can perform. Some evolutionary researchers have proposed that the recurring pressures of northern winters across the Pleistocene epoch were a significant driver of the expansion in human planning capacity, working memory, and social intelligence. The cold did not only kill the weak. Over hundreds of thousands of years, it selected for exactly the kind of forward-thinking, cooperative, tool-using intelligence that defines our species. Your ancestors did not survive winter in spite of being human. They became more human because of it. And that survival program still runs in you. The body you carry right now is the same one that endured Ice Age winters on every continent. Your stress response, that uncomfortable cascade of cortisol and adrenaline when resources feel uncertain and the future feels opaque, is not a flaw in your design. It is a perfectly calibrated winter survival alarm. Your craving for calorie-dense foods intensifies in cold and darkness because your body is still executing a program written 30,000 years ago in the glacial cold: store what you can, move less, conserve heat, pull the group closer. The human impulse to gather around fire and tell stories in the dark, in fireplaces, at campgrounds, at late-night kitchen tables, is not sentimentality. It is ancient architecture. It is what kept the species alive long enough for you to be here. The cold hits you before you even open your eyes. For 30,000 years, that was not a metaphor. It was the first fact of every winter morning, as real and immediate as breathing. And your ancestors, armed with nothing but accumulated knowledge, controlled fire, bone needles, rendered fat, fitted hides, and each other, faced that fact every single year. They did not merely endure it. They organized around it, bonded through it, and built the foundations of human culture inside it. Every morning they woke up cold and alive is the reason you are here today, reading this, warm.